Dí Gaeilge is Misha Owen ag Bite Size Irish, and today I'll be talking with Ciara Ní É. It's going to be a very interesting topic and conversation. Really looking forward to it. I especially like the idea of like self-expression and creativity. So let's go. Ciara.
Gonna start to.
Tá go fáilte gonna smart
Tá mé go má seachas go mé ar na madí cruise tuis gur gurtí bé a routine an take scate well caiici seohin.
Oh, tá sin Jackery ar hin.
It's not easy, but I'm here anyway. It's going to be fine.
A hurt ankle.
Yeah.
So, Ciara, I'm going to dive into the bio because it's an interesting one. A bit of Irish and then a bit of English, and then we'll dive into it. So, is fila I Ciara Ní É, a bhfuil a cuid filíochta léite aici in Nua in London, sa bhriséil sa túlan agus bhaile in Éireann. Fáil siach séthir dá cuid in Irisí éagsúla, Anas, Icarus agus Cór in a measc. Is ambassador I le háras scríbhneoirí na hÉireann, chomh na hór an chór grúpa éireach atach Gaeilge agus tá céad chnúsach filíochta idir láfa aici faoi láthair. So Ciara is Irish Writers' Centre Ambassador and was Dublin City University's Writer in Residence in 2020. Ciara is the founder of REC, that's REIC, a monthly bilingual spoken word and open mic night that features poetry, music, storytelling, and rap. She has performed internationally in New York, London, Brussels, Sweden, and across Ireland. Her work has been published in a variety of journals, including Icarus, Anas, and Cór. She was chosen for Poetry Ireland's Introductions series in 2017. She is co-founder of the arts collective that we'll definitely talk about, Éireach Atach Gaeilge, and her first project with the group was selected for the Abbey Theatre's 5x5 in 2020. The video for Phenomenal Woman, a 2018 commission about the Ladies Gaelic Football Association, was viewed over 300,000 times and probably and counting, and brought her work to wider attention. Other commissions include RTE TV, BBC Radio, TG4, TG Cahir, and the Irish Writers' Centre. Her poetry collection is forthcoming. So Ciara, fáilte isteach. It's a real privilege to have you here. You call yourself a poet, wouldn't that be right? You do.
Yeah. I think at the start, when I started writing poetry, people said you're a poet. I used to get embarrassed. And actually, it was only last year on one of the only nights out that happened in 2020, you know, a socially distanced kind of one, that on the side of the street, you know, like we were talking to someone and she said, "What do you do?" And I said, "Oh, I'm a poet," because I'm so used to people kind of, people find that quite interesting, but so I kind of make light of it or something. And she turned to me very seriously, and I remember, because it's one of the only social interactions I had in 2020.
Yeah.
She said, don't say it like that. Don't laugh at yourself. Like, don't make it small. And I was like, oh yeah, actually, I should be proud of what I do, because I am proud of it. But it's just in that moment when somebody is telling you that they are a teacher or a fireman or, you know, an accountant, and you say, "I'm a poet," and you kind of feel, well, I felt that I had to say, like, I know it's unusual, but I actually took a real lesson from that I should just say I'm a poet. Like, that's a fact. So it's okay.
And like, were you writing poetry for a long time before you came to that moment?
Yeah, I've been writing poetry since I could write. So I used to always write, and I have like books from when I was a child up until, you know, through the teenage years, all the angsty poetry. But I think I only started really taking it seriously or doing it kind of publicly or like in the way I'm doing it now when I was about 22, 23.
Wow. Like, why I'm very interested to speak with you, like, I got to know you kind of online. I see you online. I see stuff you're putting out. And I've seen, from what I can see externally, this journey in life you've been going through. Like, when I got in touch with you, probably originally some email, I don't think you were identifying as a poet. You know, so that's very different. It kind of reminds me of the idea of Gaeilge. We say it bites as Irish that you're going from a learner, just a learner, to being like a practitioner of the language, borrowing from like yoga, that you can have Gaeilge gach lá and just use it every day, and you'll eventually become a speaker, but to make it part of your identity. So there's this kind of baggage with, you probably can't call yourself a Gaeilge if you're not fluent, I guess. What do you think?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I found that like a lot of things, and it's interesting you bring up identity, because there's so many questions of identity that I find really interesting. But with Gaeilge, yeah, it was like one day I wanted to be a Gaeilge. This was my ambition. And then it actually happened that I somehow went past that. And one day I actually no longer wanted to. I was like, I'm not a Gaeilge. And I realized that because the reason I'd gone past it is people kind of load it kind of negatively, especially in Ireland. Like they say, oh, she's a Gaeilge, and it's almost like with an eye roll, as if it means like you're so passionate that you're really annoying or something. So that's what happened to me. But like now, I mean, that was a few years ago, and now like I really don't care if someone says I'm a Gaeilge or an Irish speaker or a Gael or whatever. Like, you know, it's the same thing, really.
Interesting, yeah. So I shouldn't read too many YouTube comments, but like we do reply to YouTube comments with bite size. But one of them recently was, I was presenting an idea and it was Asperla, and the comment was, this is roverlach dumse níl fánar méisteach I can't find das Gaeilge. So I feel this real tension that we're doing this interview. I'd prefer to be speaking Irish, to be honest. But the people I feel I want to help, I think the connection is through English, really. You know, do you feel any type of tension like that for what you're producing?
Kinta, agus tegum dit go homlan, like tá sé aisteach mar, like vek sé wad níos náidir ha doine a bheith leir Gaeilge na chéile. Agus feic méid ag tuairt ruí faoi deara, úsáid an ón an focail sin, agus déir sé éis chuí sin, agus, you know, feic méid ag fálamó na chéile. Ach, tuisciúil méid ag leir to méile, because we're speaking English, we are losing a whole layer of the interaction, you know, that we could be having. Like you might be thinking, oh, it's mad, Ciara uses that phrase from Connemara, she uses that one from Kerry, and you'd actually be taking it all in on board on this, like, not even subconscious, just like above the level while you're still while you're still talking. But I do try and make an effort with a lot of the stuff I do. A lot of my poetry, I literally make one poem and make another poem, and they're supposed to be the same poem. Like, there's supposed to be a translation. It's one's in English and one's in Irish.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And sometimes I do things macaronically, so the whole poem is bilingual, and the other one I'll give an English full translation. But yeah, I say my content that I make on YouTube as well, it's called What the Fuckle, and it's supposed to be introducing people who are learning Irish to the language. And I suppose it kind of fits with kind of like what you said is a really good line, like the people I want to help. Because I don't think that anyone who's fluent in Irish, like who's from the Gaeltacht of it, like will necessarily be wanting to learn Irish from me, you know? So why it wouldn't really make sense to give the videos in Irish. Although I have done it a bit with some of my TikToks where I've done it in English and Irish, because I don't think everybody knows about etymology of words, so that might be helpful for people.
And it's very interesting, yeah.
I think galore, but I do think there's something a bit strange with some people who never speak Irish, but they kind of have a career out of the language, but like they don't use it at all, apart from, I don't know, it's weird. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, there's a strangeness there. Like at least I tell myself, like if I'm journaling, say it's Gaeilge. I've got two sons that I'm bringing up with Gaeilge, and they speak Slovene with my wife, and there's English between myself and my wife, so it's a real mix. I definitely curse in English, so if you attacked me on the street, I'd be like, Okay, I can't say it here on YouTube, but it would come out Asperna.
Does that happen often that people attack you on the street?
It's only happened once or twice.
You're giving they're even a really bad name to Limerick now. You're not allowed.
I know. That's outside of Limerick, I swear, completely outside Limerick.
I know, just after that article recently, wasn't there some article about the Stripe lads or something that really tried to characterize Limerick in a really bad light?
Yeah. And it got into Forbes, I guess, is the thing that really upset people. But like the people of Limerick really united, and I'm really proud to be part of Limnach. And absolutely, it's just this hangover idea that it doesn't match. Yeah. So, do aster leis an Gaeilge. Cadasta seo a raibh Gaeilge got sahaile nó conas a rinne tú an nasca seo leis an janga?
Ní raibh Gaeilge sahaile, so I wasn't raised with Irish. Ach, nuair bhí mé thart ar dóigh bhí múntóirí agam a bhí anmha. Bhí siad like right pushed. So when I was about 12, I had teachers who were doing job sharing, and they just made the language so fun. I'm just kind of naturally very interested in the way language forms together. So I remember being 12 in the class and learning that like if you add ul in front of any word, it means like a large version of. So I remember peist and ulfeist, skull and ulskull, marga and ulvarga, and I was like, this language is great. Like, and now that I'm a bit older and I know a little bit more about language, I know that it's because, English maybe like a few hundred years ago started pulling in words from all these different languages. And so in English, there's about 7 different words for the same thing, and not all the words relate to each other, and the spelling system is not regular, and there's like a million irregular verbs, and like it's just English is completely all over the place. And then when I was about 12, when I learned how regular Irish is, and how if you know this word, you can make another word, and it's all, there's only a few irregular verbs, and the rest of it's so normal, it's just so easy to predict. I just thought this language was great, and it had the added advantage that like I knew, even though my parents didn't speak Irish, I came from the background where they put a cultural value on the language. So as I learned more, they were clearly quite proud of me, and they would, they'd be telling people, "Oh, our daughter, like Tashi Leafa, like she's fluent and she's learning." And I just followed the language then. I went to the Gaeltacht every year in Cloiste Chamwish, and when I was leaving school, I had a lot of other ideas of what I was going to do. But what happened was I just knew, because of my background and that I had no other reason to speak Irish, if I didn't study Irish in university, that I would just never speak it again. So I studied it in university, and yeah, Sinead.
And what was that like in university? You could have like modules that aren't that interesting. Were you able to kind of connect deeper with your Irish through that experience?
If I'm honest, my Irish wasn't good enough for the university level, and I'm not sure. I went to Trinity College, and I'm not sure. I do know in UCD, I think they have a lot more courses to kind of help students adapt. When I did my master's in UCD, and there's a course called it was all about learning Irish or using Irish at university, and they taught them how to use folklore, taught them how to use all these different tools and how to recognize different types of Irish language, just really how to get to grips with it. Whereas like I was just thrown in trying to read Skeelta, like Gar Skeelta Ecoin, like with Irish from not like a Gael school. I didn't know that there was, I didn't understand that there was masculine and feminine words. I think I knew on some level, but I didn't understand. And like people could say, well, you could have learned that for yourself. Well, I could have, but I was also like a 16, 17-year-old person. And I wasn't particularly, even though I liked the language, like I wasn't the type who would actually, I don't know, I can't explain it exactly, but I know a lot of people who said the same thing. Friends of mine who now speak fluently, who just didn't know basic grammar points when they started university. So I think it was a bit too challenging for me. Like some of the modules were, and I did all right because I studied and, I tried, but I don't think it met me on my level. So I was just really, really trying to keep my head above water. Whereas if they'd come and met me where I was, I could have gotten a lot more out of the course. But that's, it's not necessarily the university's fault that I wasn't ready for university after completing my secondary school education.
Yeah. And so between, say, your poetry and performance, ag leartas Gaeilge, there's an element of self-judgment or possible like having that self-critic. Do you have that inner critic?
Nach bhfuil ba chu Gaeilge bachar
Tá sé rás ar fad?
No, an é sin antá she got like
Ní ha néchar.
Oh, just
an rud is stop in mis beidir ag úsá an Gaeilge go homláin ná níl Gaeilge bheachta gom, like rinne mé Gaeilge ar scoil sa manscoil, níorbh sé gom sa chláiste nuach. Ní cert excuse é sin. Ach bín glór béir le mo chud Gaeilge, níl an orú is sébhú cearta gom, as cert cuinálan sin mé siar pís an ó tá miste dom cuináil mé héin siar. Ach gan am céine an Gaeilge ná a chéad teanga is leabhar ma hismóirí liom í agus tá mé gúsáidí am haideach féin. Ach tá definitely cert inner critic an sin gom.
Oh yeah, cíte bheith cuid de sin ann. Is dócha úsáidm Gaeilge gach lá le macóide agus le grúpi éagsúla ó an buintach lo agus like braham cinál lí gur tá sail trí Gaeilge gom. So like because I'm kind of living my life through Irish, I do feel very connected with the language. Like I don't feel like I'm appropriating it when I'm speaking, because it's not like I'm just using it for a poem. It's like it's completely natural for me to write poems in Irish because I live, a hefty percentage of my life through the language. In a way. So, but I do I think I do always feel this weird thing, and I've written about this in some poems that I have. Like I have a poem called An Viela ar Fad, where I kind of imagine myself as like this ratty fox from the city, and then all the like Irish speakers from the Gaeltachtaí are these like gorgeous country foxes who are all healthy and well fed. But I think there's an element of that. But then I've met so many people from the Gaeltacht, I think over the years, who've said like, oh, I really enjoy your work. And I've been like, you? Like my work? I'm not worthy. But yeah, I think I've kind of gotten over it a bit.
Cool. Fair play. Mahu, like. So you were publishing stuff online, like you had a memes as Gaeilge, if I remember right.
Oh, memes, yeah.
Memes as Gaeilge, right?
Memes, I remember my brother was saying memes, and I said, like this is years ago, and I said, no, Eamon, it rhymes with cream, and then he said macreme, and I was like, that's not yeah, I had that years ago. That was like when memes first came out. It was like 2011 or something. I made a memes na Gaeilge page. I was still in college at the time, and it was all the early memes, like that had like faces with all the lines. What like dogs and cats and frogs, and
I don't even have an example. Yeah, of these, but
it's so funny because you can see how memes have evolved over the years. Like they used to be these kind of basic 2D things. That were kind of just, they worked on one level, and now they're all very self-referential, and like it's what's the whole nature of memes. But yeah, I had that years ago, and it was really funny because it was like, it was memes na Gaeilge, but people didn't know it was me who was behind it, so it's like my secret identity. So they'd be like, did you see this meme? And I'd be like, I made that.
And so you were in college, like you weren't still at school when you published this thing? The memes? No,
I was doing my English and Irish course. I think I was in 3rd year.
Okay, and so what gave you that inspiration? Because I'm asking because you can see a progression with you since then. You've basically been publishing online since. So there must have been some kind of creative energy or something that you wanted to produce, like.
Tá the oberwali dénta got mahu. Yeah, I suppose I did. And I do remember at that time, like I was nervous kind of about putting stuff online because I was afraid of my grammar. So just back to what you were saying before. And I should say, I do feel bad that I said I didn't feel ready for the course in Trinity, because like the lecturers were fantastic. Like they're amazing. And like, I actually ended up doing really well. Like, it's not that I didn't, but I just feel like there could have been more basic things that I learned, because that's all I meant. I do feel like I didn't portray that right. But yeah, I think I always wanted to create things. But like a lot of young people, maybe I felt very kind of hampered by what other people would think. You know, so even though I would have loved to have gone up on stage and performed poems when I was 18, 19, 20, 21, like it really took me until I was 23 to be able to get on stage. And even then, like I was really scared. Like the first time I ran a poetry night, like I was so nervous. There was a room of 60 people looking at me and I was like, why did I do this? Like, why did I organize this? But what you don't realize is that no one else is wondering why you organized it, and no one else is, you know, they're just enjoying the night. They're not saying Ciara's so bad, she left a shave out. Like, but I definitely felt a lot of pressure. But I think maybe that's just one of those things that if you want to do something, you just do it despite the fact that you feel the fear and like all the pressure.
Yeah, like if we jump over to Éireach Atach Gaeilge, am I saying Atach right? Because I haven't actually heard it pronounced. Queer Arts Collective. So the bio I have, Grúpa Cainteoirí Gaeilge LADT plus, atá Éireach Atach Gaeilge atá sé mar aim acu séhir disciplinach a Herbert mar chéiliúra de star na Cainteoirí Gaeilge LADT plus. Éireach de Gaeilge are a group of LGBT plus Irish speakers who plan to develop a bilingual, multidisciplinary piece of work that celebrates the history of LGBT plus Irish speakers. So is this, like we're talking about a sense of identity, there's definitely different layers to you and your kind of self-expression, and is it self-acceptance?
Yeah, there's definitely
all this.
Yeah, that blurb that you read, I think, was from the Abbey 5x5.
Okay.
That was our first kind of gathering that we had as a group. So I set up Éireach Atach Gaeilge with Owen McAvoy, who's a friend of mine, and he works in UCD, and he's a poet and he draws and he's very creative altogether. But we're both queer, we both speak Irish, and we both noticed that there's loads of people who are queer and who speak Irish who also make art. We said we really would like to get all these people together and see what these creative energies could do together, and also just to create kind of a cohesive group, because there's so many people, but yet kind of the last thing people think of when they think of Gaeilge is LGBT. Just because of these, there's a connection, people imagining a connection between the Irish language and Catholicism, or like old things that are traditional or old-fashioned or conservative. But like the thing about Irish is that Irish is older than the word, you know, Ireland. Like Irish has, you know, it's been here for a long, long time, and there's been queer Irish speakers. There's been everything you can imagine. It's happened in Irish, and it still is. So we reject that kind of categorization of the language and of its speakers.
We do get a bit of this at Bite Size, the kind of the traditional view, maybe from outside of Ireland. So there's a whole mix of people we're in touch with. A lot from outside of Ireland, more and more within Ireland, people coming back to Gaeilge, which I love, and I love focusing or at least helping that cohort of people. But we do get definitely those questions of like, what prayers do you use on, with this assumption that all that goes together. And I'm like, well, no, like that's not part of my life or my identity, you know. So that's interesting that you're pushing the boundary, because you're making a statement with the group that like this is a group of people that you're working together, this creative energy, you said. And so what has come out of the group?
It's actually been great, because we were all working away on our own, but we hadn't really it just gave us something to, I don't know, hang it all on. Like whenever anyone from the group gets a commission or wins a prize or anything, it's in the newsletter and we can all cheer each other on. And it's kind of, Owen also is involved with the Queer Córa, which is an LGBT conversation circle. And it used to happen in person once a month, and now it happens online twice a month, just because of COVID. But he has an Instagram page for that. It's just Queer Córa. And he uses that for the Queer Córa, but also kind of as an archive and a curation of LGBT happenings in Irish. And it's just like if you to go through it and see all the different people and all the exciting things they're doing, like writing plays, writing songs, like just various performances in drag. Like there was the first ever Dragland last year by Kitty Nihulahan. So it was a drag show with loads of different performers using Irish. And it's really nice to see it as kind of a movement of people who are all queer, who all speak Irish, and it's not a big deal. It's just the way our lives are, you know? And it was there before, but now it has like an umbrella, you know, to fall under.
Yeah. I saw yourself and Owen McAvoy, you interviewed Owen, I think.
Yeah.
And you covered like creativity and even the banner on the video, like there's loads of color. I love it. It's like very expressive. Yeah. So I guess self-expression is one thing I'd like to mention, because we kind of work off this framework at Bite Size Irish. It's by an author called Robert Greene and a book called Mastery, but he's got an article on Medium that gives a quick summary as well. The basic idea he looked back at how people got good at something over the ages. And so like jumping in with intensity and really studying what you're trying to study really pays off later on. And the framework has steps. So you go from that to starting to test out socially what you've learned. Now, in our case, it's language learning, and Robert Greene does cover that too. But his kind of ultimate thing is you're moving towards self-expression. So in our case, someone being able to express themselves as Gaeilge. Now, that's one thing I struggle with, because I can express myself better in English. Like all the media, like I've spent thousands more hours reading and consuming English than Irish. And that's a fact of life, to be honest. Like I'm not going to force myself to watch T.G. Carr just because there's something else interesting on YouTube for me to absorb. Like, I suppose a tangent question, right? Do you work on the Gaeilge you have? Do you like add to the richness of your Gaeilge like on purpose? Do you work at it?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's what I was kind of saying earlier on, is that if we were speaking Irish to each other right now, I'd be learning from you, and I'd be hearing new phrases and like very possibly taking them on, or I'd like look them up later and say, oh, that's a great thing. I'll use that in future when I am in this situation. So I'm constantly learning things, and like if I find something that fits, I'll just always use it. And what's funny is that I always remember who gave it to me as well. So I have all these phrases and I know who I learned them from and when I learned them and in what context. And when I use them again, I always think of that person. So I'm always taking on things in that way. And I'm lucky because of my job, because I do write, and a lot of it involves writing in one language and translating to the other, that I just spend a lot of time on folklore and checking what words mean. And you are right that I would have a much richer, like just a much richer variety of speech in English. And I would say things, you know, in English without thinking, like you'd say shower tray, or like I was translating something yesterday that I wrote in English originally, and I said, oh, I plucked the shower head from its cradle, and I was like, how will I say this in Irish? Like I don't want to just say I picked up the shower head, you know, because that you do lose something. So then I'm always trying to work something from English to Irish, or sometimes the reverse if I wrote it in Irish first, which makes me have to examine what I wrote in Irish. And whether, because if I translate it from Irish and it makes very simple English, then I think, oh, well, I have to make that Irish a bit more, I have to use it better, because there are a lot of different ways you can say things, but you can get lazy, I think. Well, I can anyway, in my second language, which is Irish.
So how do you deal with that? Like, do you try to enrich if you're writing then in Irish?
Writing for me is all about going through drafts and working on the drafts. Like I find it easy to write, and then it's hard to edit. But I think a lot of people are the same, because the editing is where the real work happens. So it's, when I'm going through, I will try and get rid of, if I'm overusing a verb, I might try to use a different verb, or like, I do make a conscious effort to try and make my Irish better, which is hard, like you said, because you hear and speak and write and read a lot less Irish just because of the way the world is structured.
Yeah, and it's our kind of motto of Gaeilge Gach Lá. It's like the counter to that. It's like, how do you make sure you don't learn a language? It's like, don't make it part of your everyday life at all, right?
Yeah.
And you can see people growing up around the world, the past generation, English is all around. It's radio, pop songs, everything. And it's osmosis. They're just, it's trickling in, and it's trickling into the culture. And I think a fundamental kind of structure to making the language part of your everyday life is like intentionally just like put on radio na Gaeltachta or whatever it is, or music.
It's really interesting what you said about, you're always listening to English, and that's why it's so tempting to use English, because if you want to make a reference or make a joke, it's just, you say one word, and if it's, English, it might be recognized by so many people, and they know exactly what you're referring to. So it's just such an easy way in. But at the same time, like conversely, that does mean that when I say something in Irish that refers to specifically something that happened on TG Cahirt, or if I say, oh, bye dad, or a bear, and I'm referencing Martin Taljani, like the person who understands that joke, my connection with them is so much deeper, because I know that it's really special. I know there's not many people on earth with whom I'll have that connection. So there are both sides of it.
And language, to like talk about Gaeilge specifically, I suppose, language doesn't exist on its own. Like it's this vector, it's a connection with other people, right? Although I suppose people say they're like digging deeper into who they are. Gabrielle, who used to work at Bite Says Irish, she said that she feels more herself when she's speaking Os Gaeilge, or she's like accessing a different part of herself. I thought that was lovely.
Yeah, that's the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis that you...
Oh, go on.
It's that I can't know exactly now, I'll probably phrase it wrong, but it's basically that in each language there's an entire worldview, so when a language, and it makes sense, it's the whole way you see the world and the metaphors you use. And even when I'm speaking Irish, like I'll use all these metaphors that are to do with animals, and it's just, I don't really have much experience on the farm, but just because there are certain metaphors in Irish that are to do with eggs and potatoes and chickens, like that's what I'm speaking in. So it really filters my worldview through different to English. And if you look at the way we speak English nowadays as well, we speak a lot of like kind of internet metaphors, like upload, download, and even in our everyday speech. So I find that really interesting, and as well that you can get across a different humor in different languages. And I think there's something about the certain speakers of Irish, I don't want to generalize, because I think sometimes people say like, oh, Irish is so spiritual or so this, that, or the other. And at the end of the day, it's just a language like other languages are. But I do agree that languages have different qualities to them. And it just feels different, when expressing yourself in different languages.
I suppose it's easy to jump on the examples like your emotions are upon you, Os Gaeilge. It's quite aligned to, I guess, Buddhist methodology. I guess that's easy to say, but I haven't dug into that concept much. But place names kind of jump to mind now, because in Irish, our place names is all about the countryside, the landscape, the rock that was there in the corner. It's like the field with the rock. And since English has taken over, let's say, it's this disconnection with where we live and the landscape we're living on.
It's really interesting as well, because in Irish, like if you speak, a lot of people who would be native speakers who might work the land or spend a lot of time in land or going places will use a lot of the directions. So I'm so bad at these as well, but I try, so north, south, east, and west, and they will speak in these terms of I'm going northeast, but they'll speak in these terms, and like even there's metaphors like Hánig sé in near a duiarum, Tá teach in near inti, and they have, I remember seeing videos about other languages around the world where they use north, south, east, and west in speech, and like people literally know where they are orientated, and they constantly speak in those terms. So it is interesting how, like just the language in which you're thinking can affect you. Because I have no idea which way I'm orientated, as evidenced by not even knowing if northeast is a thing.
Yeah, and I wonder that my Irish has been simplified. Like, let's accept that. So I don't have that same like directionality. I'd say to my son, Liam Tarsu Staira, but I probably should be saying Ciara Ní É. But I've lost that, to be honest, or a lot of the time.
And is that something that you want to work towards, or is it just you've accepted that you don't use it?
It took me a long time to accept, first of all, and I do accept it for what it is now. It's a form of Irish, honestly. I guess if I was to dive deeper into it, it would almost be to like make up for lacks or weaknesses that I feel in me. So maybe that's not a good motivation. But I could see a case where I consciously went and dug deeper into Irish. Like, why not?
Yeah. I think if you, for me anyway, like, and I brought up the directions because I'm going to be doing a video on them soon on what the fuckle. But like, I do want to be better. Like, I want to have richer Irish, and I do think it's something I can do over my life. But then I do think it's an awful pity that I'll die and it will die with me. But maybe along the way, I can help other people learn more, and that way it will spread. You know, because I learn from my friends, like, and I'm constantly trying to pick things up from people who are better than me, and sometimes we're better than each other in different areas, and we all help each other. So, yeah. Constantly kind of yearning.
It chimes back very well to like, I've seen so many people connecting with Gaeilge, but then kind of pulling back and not letting themselves enjoy the language because this self-judgment again. They feel that others, let's say a simple example, others in their Irish language class, they're better than me. You know, I'll never be as good as them. They're just languages people or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's more about trusting the process, I think.
It's interesting. I always find that people say, oh, you're such a languages person. I don't know if that's a thing. Maybe it is. I have no idea. But like, a lot of people speak English fine, but maybe, you know, when people say I'm not a languages person, I'm like, you speak great English. Like, I'm sure. Maybe if you'd also gone to university and studied Irish and like made a huge effort to have a social life through Irish, you would also speak Irish like me. You know, like, I gave myself every advantage because I was very focused on what I wanted. So obviously if I'd gone to university and studied law and not thought about Irish for the last 7 years, or, you know, I wouldn't be at the stage I'm at now. Yeah.
Let's jump over. There was the pronunciation now. Auron Ghar Lugach?
Ghar Lugach, yeah.
Ghar Lugach. So I've got like literally 10 seconds of the song to play, so let's go. Take me and you, I hate love, It's just beautiful, and it really drew me in when I was watching it, Ciara. So we'll put a link to all these. You know, that's available on YouTube. Can you tell me about that song?
Yeah, it's a song that I wrote. I wrote it in English originally for the Liverpool Irish Festival. So Darlúdach's song. And Darlúdach was a nun who was very close to St. Bridget. And it said that they were Anam Chorda, which means like soul friends, which is kind of this religious thing, which means they're like friends in God. I don't exactly know what it means. It doesn't translate as soulmates, but it's an important relationship in your life and in your worship, I think. So they're both nuns, and it said that they shared a bed and that they had very strong love. And I learned that the day Bridget died, Darlúdach wanted to die with her, but Bridget made her promise to stay for another year on Earth. And then a year later, on the same day, that Bridget died, which is the 1st of February. Darlúdach also died, and they're joined in heaven. But for me, it's easy to do a queer reading of that story. So I wrote the song based on that.
Cool. I have to say I wasn't familiar with Darlúdach, so I did a bit of reading on Wikipedia. Interesting, yeah. So thanks for that inspiration. And then, did you write this as a song? Was it a poem that changed, or how did it go?
Yeah, I actually I've been working with my friend Aoife. She's also a member of Untitled Chapter, and she's a beautiful singer and performer. And she had written the music. It was in the background of a video that I made, a poem that I made. And she just did such an amazing job, like exactly what I asked for, she did, and it just fitted perfectly. So I just kind of wanted to write a song. I like singing, but it was one of those things where, you talked about self-expression and kind of fulfillment maybe earlier, and definitely there is a journey in my life of seeing something and wanting to achieve it and thinking, oh, I could never do that, and then saying maybe I'll try it, and then kind of it's snowballing from there. So it happened with the Irish language, it happened with poetry, it happened with kind of getting involved with LGBT, like more publicly and more vocally, LGBT, like I'm going to say issues, but themes, I suppose. And then it's happening kind of with music as well, in that like I kind of was afraid to go next to music because I'm aware that I don't know as much as other people do. But I also I know some things about music, and I really enjoy music. I'm like a huge music listener, and I used to play the piano, and like I wanted to start doing things, but I was just so afraid. And basically, because I just trust Aoife so much, I said, could we write a song together? So I wrote the lyrics, and I asked her for some ideas then of what music it might go with. So that helped me write the lyrics kind of in a way that would suit the music she wanted. And then she wrote the music and she sent it back to me, and like she wrote the harmonies and everything. So then we had it. So we did it in English, and then I rewrote it and we recorded it in Irish as well. But
okay. Would you ever call yourself a singer?
I know, this is the thing, like, no. And what's so funny is that I have another song called The Ruddy is Mo Nach Mahlam Fui Vanan a Herden. So it's like what I dislike about Irish women. And I sing in that, and there's like a background beat. And like, I think it's just because I didn't want to use the label of a singer, because like, I don't know if it's an Irish thing or what, but like, I'd hate for people to think that I think I'm good or that I think I'm a singer. Yeah. So I'm just like, oh, it's just a poem that has music. And I also sing, like it's fine. But I think that was it, is that I always kind of thought, oh, one day I'll study it. I'll study it so well and I'll be really good. And then I can do singing. But then I realized that day is probably never going to come. I'm very busy. And like, I think you should just be able to try things without thinking you're perfect, So I had to get over this thing in my head. Like I had to get over, I'm not perfect, but like I could die next year. And I'd rather have like written some songs and released them now. So I'll just do it. And
yeah. And that song in particular, like it's beautiful. Like it's a real pleasure to listen to.
Thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, thanks for putting that out there. A bit more of self-expression. So you have Rec. So we'll cover what that is. But in your last one in April 2021, you finish the poem, I think, as the door shut, I didn't cry.
Oh, yeah.
And you start dancing.
Yeah.
Which I was like, geez, fair Peter.
That was really funny. So I wrote a song called The Love Poem by the Leaving, about leaving a country and leaving a lover behind. And Owen Holland, who also goes by the moniker Captain A, is a musician, and he was working on music one night, and he had my poem in a different tab, and it started auto playing or something. And it just so happened, he was explaining to me that it just fitted perfectly with the timing. The rhythm fitted exactly with the whatever beats per minute that he was working on. And he said, maybe I should do these together. So he worked it up and he sent it to me. So I woke up to this gift in my inbox one morning of this really cool song added to my poem, which I recorded in my kitchen one day during lockdown. Like I'd written it years before, but I'd never shared it. And this is just one of these things that's really driving me to share more now, because like, just because I recorded that one day and shared it, it's been made into this really cool like track. But there's a minute of music at the end of the track. So I asked Owen if he could send me the music so I'd perform it on stage, and he did, but there was still a minute longer than my poem. So I just thought like the only thing I can really do when I'm alone on a stage is dance. So, and then I thought like, I really don't want to dance. I hate this idea. And I wrestled with it for like a few weeks, because like, how terrifying is it to dance on your own on stage in an empty auditorium with live cameras streaming you or live across the internet? And
it's
like,
pretty brave, I have to say.
It's like, I really hated this idea, but it's just because I hated it so much, I realized that I had to do it. And like, it's like not a big deal at all. And I'm so glad I did it, because nobody cares.
Yeah, just people watching go, fair play. Wow, that's great. Yeah.
And the funniest thing is I met Owen that night, because I was in Galway for the performance and he lives there. And I told him, or he'd watched it, and he said, if you'd asked me, I could have just taken out the music. Like, because he'd actually intended that I'd be performing it at a festival and there'd be loads of people there and they'd all talk after the poem and I'd walk off stage. But instead I was in an empty auditorium because of COVID and all these cameras on me. But I'm quite glad it happened the way it did.
Wow, fair play. So Rec is your project. You created it, right? What is it?
It's a spoken word event, a bilingual, multilingual spoken word event that I've been running for the last 6 years. So I set it up originally just as part of a local festival here in Dublin called the Five Lamps Arts Festival. And it was really just, I was speaking to the director and I really wanted an opportunity to bring all these different spoken word artists who perform in Irish to one event, because I was kind of following them separately, but I didn't see them performing at one cohesive event. So I got them all together and that was the first ever Rec. And like, I wasn't sure it was ever going to happen again. Like I said, it was earlier on, it was my first ever time doing a big event like this. And I was in charge and I didn't know how this was happening. But after the event, everybody started asking me when the next one would be on. And I realized then that there would be a next one. So I've just been carrying on since then.
Yeah,
so we've been at like festivals like Electric Picnic and Body and Soul and like loads of different kind of arts festivals. That we were at Courts in Galway. That's the one I was just talking about with the dancing. Yeah, it's a really enjoyable project. The next event will be with the International Literature Festival Dublin next Friday.
Fantastic. And like at least some of these are on your YouTube channel, right?
Yeah, since COVID, sorry, we've had a few events. We had some Zoom live ones, some events with like Dublin City Libraries, and also there was a video competition, which was great because it gave people, you know, I find with videos, sorry, you can just be on a screen, or you can let people make a whole creative video themselves.
I'm going to jump. So I have a little bit of thing to read. So it's from Ciara Ní É. This is just a snippet from your blog. Is mí rud a chumad tar faoi cheilt go léithúil tuigemuid nach féidir lena bheith anrach an tamar fad agus an ceart ar fad ag an rátas gur minic a bris béal duine a thrón. Ach is amantí níl an dara raugain ach an iarna instant. So Ciara Ní É is an interesting one. It was kind of hard for me to conceptualize what it was, but from what I understand, it's a piece. There's a recording, and it's essentially around a poem that you wrote. Can you describe it a bit more?
Yeah, it's so Ciara Ní É was commissioned by Ali na Gaeltachta for a conference they were having online. So the conference should have been happening in reality, but instead it was an online theatre conference, and they were commissioning some theatre pieces from Ireland, Wales, and Scotland. So myself and Sam O'Farrig were chosen. He's also a member of Gaeilge. Were chosen for the Irish language ones, and I had this piece, kind of an idea in my head of. It's just kind of a one scene thing. I started working it up during the time at the Abbey 5x5. And it's just like a kind of one scene out of maybe a longer piece, or it could just be a kind of a one-act play where there's a bridesmaid giving a speech at a wedding, and then the poem is the speech. So slowly, as the poem goes on, you realize kind of the truth comes out, I suppose. Yeah.
Do you want to give any background to what the story is, or let people watch it?
No, I think it would kind of ruin it. But it's not like, it's just a slow burn kind of thing. But I find it very interesting that, you know, that there are so many emotions hidden every single day, and there are so many kind of long held grudges and long held flames and this kind of stuff, and just that like human reality of life, I suppose, is kind of very fascinating to me. So I made an effort with this piece to capture something of that.
Well, yeah, like you look at somebody and you think, they're not going through that, but then you kind of realize, sure, we're all the same really in the end. They must be thinking the same as well. Like, so I'm interested in Carl Jung, and part of his kind of theorizing was the shadow self, where my interpretation of it, just to survive when you're young, like if you're angry, your parents will tell you to shut up, and you do, just so you can survive in the family home, and just for example, or with friends, or at school, or whatever it is. And so let's say if you're angry, you suppress that anger, and it's like pushed down into the shadow. And then it kind of comes out unexpectedly, like you're like, where did that come out of? And Jung's process is individuation, where you're recognizing more of this, and you don't have to express it. So you don't have to like punch somebody when you're angry. But you're, in just this example, you're accepting like, okay, there's a bit of anger there, or whatever it is, different emotions that you said. So that kind of, it jumped out at me, that little piece you wrote under the video, because like it is about being truthful with yourself in a way.
Yeah. I caibe beag an Carl Jung a leomhanis mar the sin anspatial. I think like really knowing yourself is so important, but and I spend so much time trying to know myself. I don't know if that's a real millennial kind of thing, but I don't think it's only in a selfish way. I think if you know yourself and you know what you want and how you want the world around you to be, that's how you can probably achieve more. Because otherwise you're just not thinking for yourself, you know. Yeah,
absolutely, yeah. Module oilacht. Ciara is spare van who? If it will carry come sin ra.
Okay, Ciara makes solution.
On your blog, like you definitely, in parts anyway, celebrate beauty. There's a video, I don't remember the title of it, that you have in the sidebar. It's about kind of celebrating life. So this is all connected, like, but I suppose with beauty, like there's the beauty of the language. I know you said that Irish is just another language. Like it is just another language. I don't know, is it the language itself? Is there like an inherent beauty there, or is it kind of the connections we have with the language that it kind of evokes maybe imagery, if you say that simplistically? Like, do you see a beauty in Gaeilge?
Tá sé dachar mar like braham gomín anna chud kaint if we all lucht na Gaeilge agus beidir bhfuil beag an the ábhéal ann. You know, when people say, oh, it sounds like a fairy language or something, and like I don't exactly know how to respond to that ever, because in a way it's kind of, I don't know, like it's usually meant as a benign comment, and that's how I take it. Like it's just somebody trying to say a compliment. But I guess it's because it sounds exotic. But so it's kind of an exoticization or kind of othering of the language then. And I kind of think like, oh, well, it doesn't sound like a fairy language to me. It sounds like the way I, you know, order chips, or, you know, it sounds very everyday. But also I do think Irish is a beautiful language. But I mean, I think, and it's funny because you know, I'd say that, and a lot of Irish speakers and Irish learners would say that. And is that because that's the reason I learned Irish? Because I think it's beautiful on some level. Because maybe if I didn't think it was beautiful, I never would have learned it. Or maybe if I didn't recognize that. So I don't know which came first. Is it the fact that I know it that I think it's beautiful, or the fact that I think it's beautiful that I bothered to know it? But I don't know. There is a great emphasis in Irish on people being deisbhéalach. There's a great oral tradition, like at the Oireachtas na Saona, which is the kind of an annual gathering, and with lots of Irish speakers and performers, with lots of competitions for dance and poetry and all this stuff. Yeah. There's a great emphasis on just being able to, like a lot of the competitions revolve around being able to say things nicely. You know, there's even one where you get a topic and you just have to stand up and speak for 3 minutes about the topic, kind of off the top of your head. Like that's a competition. So, and I do think even in, so I think there's a specific, and maybe it's because there's less Irish speakers. So when we meet one who speaks beautifully, we really, really appreciate it, because we're like, you are rare.
That's true, yeah.
But
there is rarity, yeah.
Yeah, because like, do you think, like in English, I don't hear as often people being like, oh, she's a beautiful speaker, you know?
You don't, yeah, you wouldn't really, unless they were talking about, let's say, a poet or literature, a writer, literature person. Yeah, it's like, it's very subjective, I guess. When I hear the Scandinavian languages, like I love hearing Swedish, Norwegian. I'll watch like crime drama on Netflix because I love hearing what they're expressing, and I love the rhythm. So there's something, I think, inherently like interesting for me in those languages. So I guess I can imagine that somebody is seeing that also somehow. Like there's probably something inherently interesting about it.
Oh no, like the thing is, I'm the biggest nerd. I'm just trying to be careful that I don't fall into the trap of the Irish speaker who always talks about how gorgeous Irish is. Like I would, like when I'm talking to somebody from Donegal and like the way they say their CH is so softly, like I love that. Like I zone in on the smallest things and find them really interesting and really gorgeous. But like I just kind of always come back to this thing that like Irish is a language and all languages are just a language, and like that they all deserve, like they're all great, is what I'm saying, I suppose.
So the language and the countryside, for me, there's a big connection there. And when I like get out past Galway to like on Spideal, there's some kind of atmosphere. I just feel it. There's something there. So you spent time recently in South Kerry, is that right? So how did that go? Cén for everyone? Balian Skellig, go on.
Vi me own tish COVID is docha. So it was Christmas time, and a group of friends and I, like, I mean, what round of lockdowns were we on? Round 4 or something. It was there was rumors, or maybe it was even said by the government, that lockdown would start again immediately after Christmas.
Yes.
So my friends and I, who had said for multiple lockdowns, we'd said we really should just get a house down the country and live together, because it makes no sense that we can't see each other, because we're, you know, everything is just awkward. So that's exactly what we did. We went down for New Year's, but with a bag of stuff, and said, if a lockdown's announced, this is where we'll stay. And then January became February, became March, became April, became May. And I just moved back to Dublin last week. So partly because and this has been talked about a lot, like in the countryside, in Kerry, like nobody lives there in the winter, and in the summer there's a lot of tourists coming in. So it's harder to find somewhere to rent, because you know, people come for a week at a time and there's more money to be made, and that's the way it goes.
Yeah. So was this an interesting time? Geez, I'd love to do that.
Yeah, I mean, we share house, we may Mahoney le group of corda, you know, well, Gaeilge acu, I guess space acu so Gaeilge, I guess, you know, so we Janana ve croch lenakela. So I've never actually lived with Irish speakers before. So it was really nice to have Irish as the language of the house. Like all these things about like, pass me the butter. How do I say this? You know, like you don't want to say, could you please give me the butter? Like you need to learn how to say these things.
Definitely,
like, yeah. So that was gorgeous. And obviously there's nowhere like Kerry for the Tír-Crach. Like the views just incredible, which is how I broke injured my ankle, because out for a run in some uneven ground. But apart from that, it was just absolutely gorgeous. Agus bhí sé go deas like is Gaeltachtaí freisin. Agus bhí sé go háling a bheith an tango úsáid agus a clostáiltí bu na háte.
So a raibh an Gaeilge mar himpe?
Bhí agus ní raibh, like is Gaeltachtaí ach tá rá, like tá sé dacarí anamh cé na daoine bhfuil Gaeilge acu ach rinne mar ar fad iirecht agus bhfuil mé le go leor daoine ar Gaeilge acu.
Yeah, arouse, yeah. So Ciara, we'll jump like most people. I'd say the best place to find Ciara, Ciara.wordpress.com. We'll put a link as well. But apart from that, like you're working on a collection of poems, or how would you describe it? What is that project?
I'm working on my first collection, and I'm not exactly sure. I really want to tell everyone about it, but I'm not exactly sure what I can say yet. But it's going to be coming out next year, hopefully, probably at the end of the summer. So it's my first ever collection, and I suppose that means a lot because you kind of have to decide what are you going to put in and what won't you put in and what style will it be in. So I am like very primarily, I mean, not primarily, but very heavily a performance poet, and performance is very important to me. So I'm just trying to see how I can make that part of the book or have an accompanying element of sound and maybe video as well.
Well, that sounds intriguing, actually, because it's more than just a book.
Yeah.
You're saying it sounds like something bigger or richer.
Tasúla go mé, but at the same time, I think it is nice that people, I particularly like having a book, especially when it's a language you might, because I want to have the English and the Irish where available. And I like that people could listen and have their own book to doodle on or underline or whatever they want to do.
Fantastic. Well, I'm looking forward to it.
We'll
keep an eye out. So, Ciara, Gramila Margaret, like I really enjoyed kind of diving into those topics. And thanks for like bringing your whole self and bringing us along the journey. I really enjoyed it. So, on a mishakira.wordpress.com and ishin an not as far the Queenie Ladul.
Yeah, I mean, I've bought mishakira.com, but I haven't done anything with it yet, so that's still pending. Yeah, so Shine and not as far, and I have Instagram, and I've started doing TikToks, and I have all these different things, but just trying it all out, just loving life.
Can I ask you a tangential end question? So that I did want to ask you. So you create a lot, you produce a lot, and do you feel like it's like kind of this scattering of like you put so much out there, sometimes it's hard, so I'm speaking for me, not about you, it's hard to like put enough structure on this to make it feel like I've done this project, I've like to present to people the different aspects. Are you just happy to put stuff out there and let people find your best stuff, or how do you deal with this?
Yeah, I think it can be a bit of a flurry of availability. There's just so much happening, and I've kind of gotten into TikTok because it's short and you can cover one thing, not even fully, because I make them 30 seconds so that I can put them on Instagram too. So it's not a long bit of information, but it's just a quick one. But yeah, even that, it takes time, and everything takes time. But I think it's good because you connect with people who are interested in your work on the various sites. And then I always kind of have overarching kind of longer projects working at the same time.
So you've different things going on. Yeah, interesting. Yeah. Well, it's always a pleasure to see what you're creating. So Gramila Margaret, Ciara, as we share our Slaughter Letting of.
Gramila Margaret, though.
All right, Slán.